Welcome to another explainer. If you're a junior developer tuning in today, well, this one is absolutely for you. I was looking through this famously ironic survival guide called Ninja Code, and it perfectly captures that burning desire we literally all get when we're starting out. The urge to write code that looks undeniably, clever. You know the feeling. You want to write something so compact and tricky that senior developers are just going to gasp in awe. But today, we're going to decode this satirical guide to show you why trying to look like a coding genius usually backfires completely in a real team environment.
The original article we're pulling from today sets the stage with this classic Confucius quote, "Learning without thought is labor lost, thought without learning is perilous." The author uses a really heavy dose of irony here, describing these mythical code ninjas who intentionally write terse, cryptic, and just downright confusing code to quote-unquote sharpen the minds of their peers. The joke, obviously, is that these so-called ninjas aren't enlightened masters at all. They are active threats to their codebase. Throughout this explainer, we're going to look at these sarcastic ninja tricks and translate them back into the real, clean coding habits you actually need for a successful career.
It's incredibly common for beginners to feel anxious about their skills. You might think that writing simple, readable code makes you look like a novice, right? So you overcompensate by making things ridiculously complex. But let's sharply pivot to reality for a second. Imagine a tired developer, maybe your teammate, maybe your boss, staring at their screen at 2 a.m. trying to fix a critical bug. When they hit a wall of hyper-complex, completely unreadable ninja code, they are definitely not going to be impressed by the massive intellect on display. They're just going to be frustrated by the roadblock you've built.
When you really read through this article, it becomes crystal clear who the main victim of ninja code actually is: the code maintainer. Software development isn't just about getting a machine to run commands. It's about communicating your logic to the very next human who opens your file. And honestly, here's the kicker. Very often, that code maintainer who's pulling their hair out over your clever tricks, that's going to be you. 6 months from now, after you've completely forgotten how your own program works. True enlightenment in software development comes from absolute clarity for the maintainer, not cleverness for the author.
Okay, let's jump into Section 1, the Ninja Coder myth and this wild obsession with brevity.
When we look into this first myth, it's pretty crazy to think about the sheer chaos we create just to save a little bit of screen space. The source, ironically, advises developers to use chained ternary operators. Just massive strings of question marks and colons to show off. A ninja thinks this is elegant, just because it fits on one line. But the reality for junior devs? A standard multi-line if-else statement is infinitely better. Sure, it takes up more vertical space, but someone reading it immediately understands the logic. They don't need to grab a pen, paper, and a whole lot of patience just to decipher a single line of code.
Another classic ninja trick for brevity is using exotic single-letter variables, like X or Y, everywhere, just to stay stealthy. The ironic advice even says something like, "A short variable disappears in the code like a real ninja in the forest." But think about it. If you bury a single letter in a massive 2-page loop, you actively destroy a maintainer's ability to use the search function in their code editor. The reality is that standard iterators like I, or even better, highly descriptive iterators, let anyone immediately grasp what's being counted. No endless scrolling up and down required.
Moving right along to Section 2, the art of bad naming. Getting abstract and vague.
So the article sarcastically tells these ninjas to soar high and be abstract by using the most universal generic words possible. I want you to think of names like data, item, or value as your ultimate do-not-use list. Naming a variable data is entirely useless because literally every variable holds data. Naming something str or num just tells the reader the data type, which, by the way, their editor probably already tells them, but it gives absolutely zero clues about the actual meaning. What string is it? A password, a username, an address? These kinds of names force deep meditation rather than quick comprehension.
Then we have the terrible habit of aggressive abbreviation. The running joke here is that you should shorten everything, like BSR instead of browser, or UA instead of user agent, so that, quote, "only a worthy person with truly good intuition can uphold your code." By arbitrarily ripping the vowels out of your variables, you aren't saving any meaningful disk space. You're just making the codebase completely unpronounceable and unreadable. The junior developer reality is super simple. Just use full, unabbreviated, correctly spelled words.
Now this builds into an even more devious psychological trap: smart synonyms. A ninja coder might use display, show, render, and paint as prefixes for functions that effectively do the exact same thing. The author jokes that this makes life more interesting. In reality, doing this makes the maintainer hallucinate subtle differences that simply aren't there.
If you use display in one file and show in another, a developer is going to waste their time wondering why you changed the verb. The real goal should be absolute consistency. Pick one prefix and stick to it.
And please avoid the habit of showing off your emotional connection to your code. Adding adjectives like super, mega, or nice to variables brings exactly 0 technical details to the table. It forces a reader to pause and wonder if a super element somehow inherits from a regular element, or if you were just in a really good mood that day. Remember, your teammates are being paid to solve problems, not to hunt for some hidden literary meaning in your variable names.
Okay, let's get into Section 3, the variable reuse trap. We're talking manipulation and shadowing. The source article describes this as a so-called attention test to make sure only truly attentive programmers can touch your code. And how do you do it? By mixing incredibly similar variable names together in the same exact block. Think date with an E right next to data with an A. The author points out that this makes a quick read basically impossible, and when a typo inevitably happens, because it will, it stalls development for hours. Trust me, you do not want to be the reason your entire team has to take a forced tea break to debug a single mixed-up vowel. Keep your terminology distinct and separate.
Then there is variable shadowing. Imagine declaring a variable called user at the very top of your file, and then deep inside a function, you declare a new local variable, and you also call it user. A ninja thinks this is fantastic because it requires 0 effort to invent new names. But when a programmer jumps into that function, they're naturally going to assume they are working with the external authenticated user. When they realize it's a trap, completely overriding the outer one, well, the debugger becomes their worst enemy. Clean code uses unique names to prevent this scope confusion entirely.
Perhaps the most chaotic advice of all from the author is this: reuse existing names, just write new values into them. Covertly replacing a variable's value with a clone or even a completely different data type right in the middle of a function is a terrible practice. It's pitched as a way to test a teammate's memory, but mutating a variable unexpectedly halfway through its lifecycle just makes your code incredibly fragile and impossible to track. Once a variable has a purpose, let it keep that purpose.
We have finally arrived at Section 4, secret functions, side effects everywhere.
Let's walk through this absolutely catastrophic side effect scenario. So, step 1, you call a function named checkPermission. Step 2, naturally, based on the word check, you expect it to safely return a simple true or false. But step 3, you find out the hard way that this function actually executed an unauthorized update to your database under the hood. The sarcastic author calls this a really beautiful trick to broaden the boundaries of reason. But for a junior dev learning the ropes, adding hidden, state-changing actions to functions disguised as safe checks, it just completely breaks trust in a codebase.
A similar ninja habit is creating these unnecessarily powerful functions. Imagine a validate email function that doesn't just check the format, but also actively outputs visual error messages to the screen and prompts the user to re-enter their data. The ironic article boasts that bundling multiple actions together protects your code from being reused by other developers. And actually, they are exactly right. If I just want to quietly check an email format without triggering UI pop-ups, I literally can't use it. True developer reality relies on the single responsibility principle. A function should only do exactly what its name implies and nothing more.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the path to clean code and building bridges.
I want to leave you, especially the junior developers out there, with this final provocative thought. The source article concludes by saying that if you follow all these ninja habits, your code will become truly yours. No one would want to change it. And that right there is the ultimate trap. When you write overly brief, cryptic, and deceptive code, you are building an isolated kingdom. You make the code untouchable. But true maturity in software engineering isn't about proving how smart you are to the machine. It's about building something collaborative, readable, and sustainable for your team. So ask yourself, are you building a wall or are you building a bridge? Keep things clean, keep things clear. And I promise you, your future maintainers will thank you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.